Hi everyone, today we're going to be talking about basically Fivetran and its use cases and how to leverage it. In particular, I'm going to show how to replicate an Azure SQL database to Snowflake using Fivetran and kind of the benefits it derives and the setup involved in doing so, both on the Azure SQL side and the Snowflake side. So we're going to talk a little bit about like, kind of what is Fivetran, what's the purpose of it, why you use it, and then we'll jump into the demo and the demo setup. So to begin, what is Fivetran? So Fivetran basically, it's more or less an ETL or ELT tool where you can kind of take data from your different sources and replicate it over into your target databases. It can kind of collect data from different applications, websites, servers, and then it's transferred to a tool, either primarily in our case, we're doing for the purpose of data warehousing, but it can be used for other purposes as well, obviously. Um, Now, in terms of the benefits and why we use Fivetran, the level of effort to kind of replicate data and manage ETL or ELT pipelines is really kind of the bulk of what most data teams do, right? A lot of the work in analytics, when you think about analytics, is really spent in the background in the plumbing and how data moves from one source to another, whether it be data warehousing or other applications where data needs to be moved to do analysis on it. So Fivetran really helps you in that respect. It allows your business to kind of allocate time towards actually deriving value from the data and your data sources, as opposed to actually working on the integration and the minutia of pipelines and in terms of basically moving data, right? So with that, if we talk about we're going to show that in our demo, kind of easy it is to set up the kind of an incremental load from Snowflake, an Azure SQL database to Snowflake being our target. So we're going to talk about in our use case, setting up your Azure SQL environment, what that entails, how you set up Snowflake, what that entails. We're going to run a sync with um, a sample table I have both in Azure SQL and Snowflake. Then we're going to talk about a little bit about nuances of scaling it up and things that Fivetran customers typically have to still do to make sure that their pipelines run. And around pricing as well, how pricing is impacted, how it's charged, both on the Fivetran side and a little bit on the Snowflake side as well. So with that, we'll get into the demo. So first thing, what do we need to do as far as setup on the Azure SQL side? So as you can see, I have a database here and I have basically an Azure SQL database here, and inside that database, I have a table called this Fivetran table actually here, and basically I have a Fivetran database and a Fivetran table. So first step you have to do is when you have a database, you have to enable change tracking on it. And you have to do it both at the database level and at the table level that you want to enable change tracking on. So as you can see, I've got an alter database command that I ran on this particular database Fivetran. And basically I enabled change tracking first at the database level. And I had the change retention set up to 7 days, which basically all that means is if you've got syncs running from your Azure SQL environment, if you're using Fivetran to run syncs and you have change tracking enabled for 7 days, it's going to save all the changes up to 7 days. So your syncs basically need to be less than 7 days, right? So because if you do it, let's say you change a sync, you do a sync on day 1, then you do it on day 8, obviously. And if you're only saving changes for 7 days, you'll miss that days of data that isn't saved. So first you have to make sure that that change tracking is enabled. The second thing is you have to also do it at the table level as well. So the uh, basically, if you read the documentation on change tracking and syncing with you have to obviously you have to have a primary key enabled on your table so that you can have um, basically the change tracking is able to track on each table. You need to have a primary key, so Fivetran knows what changed. And second thing is you have to enable change tracking on the database as well as each individual table you want to sync, which is what we just showed right over here. And so the particular table I'm going to use for the demo is the Fivetran table here. And as you can see, I've got a primary key enabled on here, which, as we just saw, you need to have enabled. So um, uh, basically, the change tracking uses that to identify differences, as we just said. So that's on the data Azure SQL on the database side in terms of how um, uh, change tracking must be enabled on the database side. Another thing you have to enable at the um, kind of your database server level is you need to allow Fivetran IP addresses to be able to connect to your Azure SQL database, right? So you have to kind of change some firewall rules. So if we go into Fivetran, right, I've got I've got, in Fivetran, we have these things called connectors, which is what you use to connect to your different sources. And then you've got destinations, which is where you kind of take data from your connectors and then you kind of dump them into your destination. As you can see, I've got a Azure SQL DB, basically a database setup here as my kind of connection. And then I've got a destination here, which is for my Snowflake data warehouse. If you see my Azure SQL database, if I click into that and I go into setup, you see I've got this my Azure SQL kind of server. I've got my, 510 database that I just showed. I've got a user here as well. Basically, I don't have Windows authentication. I have um, uh, the SQL Server authentication enabled. But if I go to added connection, there's certain in the setup of the connector, you have to give IP addresses that need to have access to your Azure kind of SQL databases. So these are the IP addresses from that for Fivetran needs to be able to access your Azure SQL database. And as you can see on my Azure portal, I've got this particular range of IP addresses enabled. Basically, um, I've got firewall rules enabled to let these, public internet IP addresses to access, my particular SQL Server instance. So this is some of the setup you have to do on the Azure SQL side in order for, Fivetran to be able to access it and kind of set up your connection. Now, if we go back to on the Snowflake side, if we go back to our Fivetran destination, on the Snowflake side, you have to set up um, uh, a database that's where you're gonna write data to. So you need to have all your target tables have to be created in your target database, right? So in my case, I have a very simple table. Fivetran table, which is a two-column table setup. Just a primary key integer and another column, which is a varchar 255. I have to have the target table in Snowflake that's already set up. But in order to do that, obviously in Snowflake, I also need other steps I need to do kind of as a precursor. So if I go to my Snowflake instance, I've got to create a role, a user, a warehouse, and a database that I'm going to use for my syncing process for my ELT on the Snowflake side. So I did the setup on my Azure SQL side. Now I'm doing it on my Snowflake side. So this is going to be my destination where my basically tables are. And for that, I'm creating a separate role and a separate user that's going to connect to my Snowflake from Fivetran and then access a warehouse and a database which is going to basically be the target where I write my data. So in order to do that, there's certain kind of, steps you follow. First, we kind of change our role to security admin, which is basically best practice when you're trying to create, roles and users, which basically based on kind of Snowflake recommendations. So we switching a role to user security admin, and then from there we create a role for which is here role name, which is Fivetran role, and we're granting that role basically also um, we're creating a username as well here, and that username is basically identified here as well, Fivetran user, and then we're also creating that particular warehouse as the default warehouse for that particular user. So later on in further steps, we're basically creating a warehouse as well that we're going to use to run these transformations and kind of capture data from our source to our target. We're also creating a database that which is this Fivetran database here that's gonna house our tables, and then we're giving rights to our role on that particular database as well. Now, in my case, I've got a table, this Fivetran table here. I've already got it created, and I've got some data in here. Let me kind of do an execution here. I've got 3 rows in here. As you can see, these were loaded via a sync from my Azure SQL instance. So if I go and I just do select star from Fivetran table in my switch it to Fivetran. You see I've got 3 rows here, and if I go to my Snowflake, and I just ran it, I've got 3 rows here that are in sync. So now let's say I add a new row into my Fivetran table. Let's add 4 and JKL is another column I add here. So we just saw that that there we go. We just added one more row here. And then, so now we have four rows here. But on my Snowflake side, on my Fivetran table, I still have 3 rows here, right? So I want to be able to kind of start the sync to kind of show how we, without really setting up any pipelines, we're able to sync data from our source to target. So now I'll go to my Snowflake, my Fivetran, and I've got my Azure SQL DB um, connector. And then there you can see for my schema, I've already selected, basically all the tables here. I also have another table here, ADF source, but the one we're going to be really working with is this Fivetran table. And we can basically do a resync. Okay. And we're doing resync of the table. We go into the Fivetran side. Take a few more seconds to complete. Again, benefit obtained. Yep, and now we see that the data was synced. In this case, we resynced the table and pretty much all the rows got reloaded instead of the change that we just added. Let's do another example where instead of having doing a resync, we only do where the rows change. Let's do it here. Okay, so we've got one more row here. We go back to our Snowflake. You see it's got the 4 rows. You see they have the same timestamp. But then let's go into, let's do it here. And okay, and let's do a sync. And while we do a sync, we're actually looking for just changes that happen between data that was already in Snowflake versus the new row, the ID5 that we just added. So go in Snowflake side. See, it's got 4 rows now. Those still going. Let's check one more time if it's in Snowflake yet. Okay, so now we see that the data, the row 5 was loaded, and you see the timestamp. These are all at 4:26, and this one's 2 minutes later. So, basically, if you are to set up a change data capture and set up a pipeline where you have to do incremental loads, do it in a custom way for any ETL developers, like how much kind of time and effort that is. And in this case, we just did it, with a very streamlined fashion. So that's certainly one of the benefits of using Fivetran, and understandably, Fivetran is a very popular tool to be able to kind of do these things. Now, another thing as far as pricing, so the way pricing for Fivetran is you've got, you're also paying for pricing on, so Fivetran's pricing page here. You're paying for pricing, they called monthly active rows, which are rows inserted, updated, deleted by our connectors, not total rows. And this is only counted once per month, no matter how many changes you have. So you are paying a separate bill for Fivetran when you are kind of setting up a Fivetran pipeline. Now that is separate from Snowflake, where, as you notice, we've got a Snowflake warehouse that is using compute resources. And obviously we've got storage costs as well of the data that you're going to bring over. And, but the key kind of cost on the Snowflake side is going to be the Fivetran warehouse that you're using to run the pipeline. You will incur costs for that. So as you're kind of looking to scale up and have multiple loads and multiple pipelines running, it is certainly a good idea to kind of do some benchmarking, do some analysis on based on your workloads. What's that cost going to look like for you to kind of take all of your pipelines and kind of convert them to using a tool like Fivetran when you're trying to take large volumes of data into a platform like Snowflake. So that's certainly lots of benchmarking and so on is definitely a good idea to get a better, accurate understanding of the cost you're going to encounter. One other thing I will mention as well is around schema evolution. You have to be cognizant when, let's say in your source system, I'll show an example here. We've got that ADF source table here. This was, let's say this was 255 characters before, and now it's 2000 characters. If your source changes and data types change and so on, there is work to make sure that stays in sync with your target. And that schema evolution, as it happens, you're able to kind of maintain that. You do have to kind of manage that, and have strategies to manage that, even when using a tool like Fivetran. The thing is, though, even if you're doing your own ETL development, building your own data pipelines, you have to do that anyway, right? So that's something, even with a tool like Fivetran that can manage your pipelines in terms of keeping your data in sync, from terms of the schema itself and making sure the schema stays in sync and the data type stays in sync. That's something you have to manage in your pipeline as well. So that's something to keep in mind. But overall, the tool is a very it's a powerful tool, and it's certainly understandable why it's been so popular over the past few years. So thank you.